Welcome to another episode of Mission Compliance, unleashing growth potential for defense contractors. And there's a close-up of Mike. In today's episode, we continue down the road of understanding CMMC, its regulations, and controls. Up next is CM.L2-3.4.1, and this is a mouthful. Establish and maintain baseline configurations and inventories of organizational systems, including hardware, software, firmware, and documentation throughout the respective system development life cycles. Whew. We'll break down what this control means, why it matters, and how it impacts your organization's cybersecurity posture. We'll also provide practical insights and strategies for achieving compliance and securing your systems effectively. So whether you're a defense contractor aiming to win more contracts or simply someone interested in bolstering your cybersecurity knowledge, you're in the right place. It's all about that base. We're joined once again today by Mike Frieder, President of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC Professional Assessor. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman.
So, Mike, today we've reached the beginning of Control Family number 4, and we're jumping in by talking about establishing baseline configurations of organizational systems. So, to start off, simply, why is this control important?
Man, it's an incredibly important control because it begins to really dive deeply into the documentation phase of compliance. And for a lot of companies out there, if I was to sum up, what I see a lot of when we go to do our gap analyses and assessing what they have at the current time, the number one thing that they don't have is adequate documentation and policies. A lot of companies out there have got great technical controls. They've got the antivirus, they've got the endpoint management, but they lack in the documentation area. And, for us, our first job really on day one, besides technical discovery and education, is to begin to develop this baseline configuration, an inventory of the system, and everything else that's involved. So, again, establishing and maintaining baseline configurations, we'll start there. You need to have baseline configurations of your system. What are they configured like? What programs do they have? What are the security platforms that are installed? Are they graded? Do you have documentation on that? And do you have an inventory? Do you know what all your computers are? Do you know what their hardware, software, and firmware is? All of those things are required is to have a basic inventory of your system. Because let's be honest, if your system gets blown away from ransomware, how do you know what you even had? And a lot of IT people don't really think about that. But that is exactly the kind of planning that NIST SP 800-171 makes you do. And including hardware, software, firmware, and documentation. It's very specific about what it is you have to have. And then throughout the respective system development life cycles, that means when your system is going through changes and evolutions, are you updating your documentation? And so, it's really all about doing work other than the work involved in fixing things and keeping the system running. It is, do we have the system documented so that we can easily and quickly explain to an assessor what our system is and what does it consist of and things like that. So I think from that perspective, you know what, a lot of really good things going on there. But it's so important to make sure that in case something happens, you know what was there.
Absolutely. So, continuing down the road here, what are the key assessment points that an assessor would be looking for on this particular control?
Yeah, and this is a big one. The first control out of any family has usually got kind of a lot of assessment points as it really starts to dive into what the control family is about. With this one, there's one, two, three, four, five, six different assessment points. Assessment point number one, determine if a baseline configuration is established. Do you have it? Yes or no? It's pretty simple. You might put as an answer to that implemented. It's the organization's network documentation on file. Next up is determining if baseline configuration includes hardware, software, firmware, and documentation. Is it implemented? It's the organization's network documentation on file. Again, for us, obviously, we're going to say, hey, listen, just go, you got to go look at the documentation. It's not something we're going to put into our system security plan. We're going to have that as separate evidence. If you're really crafty, you can certainly link to that document or dump a link document into your Word document, however you want to do that. But yes, so go see the network documentation that's on file. And it's got to include those things: hardware, software, firmware, and documentation. Next up, determine if baseline configuration is maintained, i.e., reviewed and updated. Somebody reviewing it periodically, and when things change, is it updated? Throughout the system development life cycle. This is implemented the organization's network documentation on file, updated in real time daily through endpoint management portals and annually via third-party risk assessment reports. Again, we can pull reports if we need to, no problem at all. Determine if a system inventory is established. Okay, do you have an inventory? Do you have it documented what you have in inventory? This is implemented at the organization's network documentation that is on file and determine if the system inventory includes hardware, software, firmware, and documentation. So we got to look in the inventory and we got to see, does it include the hardware, software, firmware, and documentation? Crazy enough, assessment point 2 and assessment point 5 sound the same. First is determine if the baseline configuration includes those things. Then, does the system inventory include those things? Very curious point. What's the difference between an inventory and a baseline configuration? Well, a baseline configuration is going to say, hey, this is the baseline of how all of our systems are supposed to be configured. And an inventory lists all the things that we have. NIST says those things should be separate. Keep that in mind. That's an important one, kind of a giveaway. Next, determine if inventory is maintained, reviewed, and updated throughout the system development life cycle. It's implemented, it's the organization's network documentation that is on file. So again, are we updating and maintaining our inventory? The answer is yes. Of course we are. And that's it. That's the assessment points. It is, do you have a complete set of documentation, not just a network map, but I mean a complete set of documentation describing everything that's there, what should be there, what's acceptable, etc.
Feel like you went through 6 assessment points really fast. But, it is what it is. We will probably hear a lot of these assessment points multiple times throughout this control family because, as you said, it tends to set up what the entire control family is about. So we'll probably hear some of these again. So, what are the potential difficulties in enacting this one in an organization?
Yeah, and here I think we really get into the meat of the challenge. First off, most smaller organizations don't even have these things. They don't have baseline configurations and they don't have inventories. They just simply don't have guidance for what a system needs to have on it. So, um, that could be a challenge, right? That could be something that is very challenging for an organization to have and put together. Yes, it takes time with an IT person not answering service tickets. My IT guys out there will be loud, clapping loudly and applauding what I just said. They know how it is. They're run very busy. But I will tell you that you have to have the documentation to match. You have to. You have to. Uh, and most IT organizations just do not have adequate documentation. Documentation is so important because as you scale, or if you have an IT guy disappear on you, etc., how do you know what was there? How can someone, when you're taking a day off, how can someone take your job and do it until you come back from vacation? IT guys a lot of times are very protective of the IT infrastructure. They say that's job security. I think that's foolish. Job security is having everything documented well so that if you get promoted, you can move up. Maybe there's nowhere to move up. You're just the IT guy. Well, okay, maybe you need to take a day off. And in IT, it's a notoriously challenging industry because, hey, it's just notoriously challenging. You have a lot of people who, run operations outside of normal business hours. It's kind of nonstop. There's always a problem. Burnout is real. So documentation, believe it or not, really helps with that. And as an owner or as a manager in a company who's managing an IT person or an IT infrastructure, well, you better have it documented because if that guy walks out the door on you, you're in trouble. Serious issues. So, yeah, a lot of challenges there. But, what are the biggest challenges? Well, your tools. You may not have the right tools to perform a proper inventory, right? There's a million and one IT tools out there. Knowing which one will give you a good inventory is tough. We're big fans of Network Detective. No, it's not a paid endorsement, although it'd be awesome if they paid us. But look, we've been using Network Detective for quite a long time. It's a great way to get an inventory of a system. It's a great way to see what internal vulnerabilities could potentially exist. It's a great way to do risk assessments. It's really a fantastic, fantastic tool. You have your RMM tools out there, your remote monitoring and management tools that allow you to create inventories and stand-up configurations and things like that. and just make sure, generally speaking, that things are running the way that they should be. And I think under that circumstance, the simple reality is you've got to have those tools in place too. So, I think those are two ways that you can go about it, but everybody's got this wild hodgepodge of, they've got this wild hodgepodge of what needs to be done. There isn't really, um, a one size fits all set of solutions for IT. IT needs to fit their solutions to what the organization's needs are. And so that becomes really challenging in terms of creating documentation. What tools do you have to create documentation and reports? What tools aren't creating those reports and we need to sub in something that will? All those things are really challenging to overcome. So lots and lots of really good stuff to unpack there, but there are definitely challenges with this. Number one challenge, it's just time and discipline on the part of the IT person. The IT person has just got to take the time to really push forward in terms of making this documentation a priority. NIST mandates it. It's that simple. I get it. You're going to have to take a day off of service tickets to really get this documentation together, and you're going to have to update that periodically as the control states. So, giving the IT staff enough time, making it a priority, and deciding today's the day that we're going to do it. And we like our clients to run quarterly or semi-annual risk assessment meetings for IT at the very least. Getting all those things in order is critical. So yeah, a lot of challenges with this, but it's like my old friend Nike, right? You just got to do it. And I think that might be the biggest challenge of them all is just getting your IT people to do it. And perhaps maybe having their managers hold them accountable for that documentation being periodically updated.
All right, so that is obviously valuable information as we get into the kind of nitty-gritty of these controls. Documentation is arguably the most important part of all of this because that's what they're going to look at when it's time to decide if you're compliant or not. That's what they're going to look at when they audit you. You need it. It's vitally important. But if you've been with us for 77 episodes now, that's right. That's where we're at. If you've been with us for 77 episodes now, you know that we do the three main questions and then we try to chop it up. We try to make it a little bit funny at the end with a silly question. And this one's a bit of a doozy. So, Mike, imagine your organization's IT inventory is a zoo. Which system would be the lion or the king that everyone's a bit afraid of? And which would be the sneaky raccoon that you can never quite get a hold of?
That might just be the best silly question I've ever heard.
You're welcome.
So what comes to mind is Noah's Ark, right? You got Noah's Ark and it's flooding assessors. And Noah's got a list of every kind of animal in the kingdom, right? So the Noah's Ark list is the list of everything that you have in your system. There's a lot of animals boarding the boat, right? There's computers, there's mobile devices, there's software, there's firmware. All kinds of things have to get onto the compliance boat as the rain is pouring down, as the assessments are pouring down upon you. What are the wily ones? Well, I think the first one is I think it's ultra challenging when it comes to the seam solution because the seam solution should be part of your baseline configuration that all devices that are going to store, process, or transmit CUI are included in the seam solution. You got to have something monitoring the network, right? We got to monitor the floodwaters. So I think the seam solution is perhaps the tricky raccoon. Um, who's running the boat? Well, I think my friends who are the IT managers and directors, those are our kings of the zoo, right? Those are our lions who are taking the lion's share of compliance and trying to steer the compliance boat through the sea storm of assessors. And the lion is trying to keep all of the animals in order. He's trying to keep all of the various systems running. And then the lion's got to document everything that is coming onto the boat and going to preside in his kingdom. And so I think it's a very challenging job to be the lion. I think it's an even more challenging job to be the rain, right? The assessor, because it has to keep pouring down on you, control after control after control. And all the while you've got Noah trying to steer the boat through the storm and try to get through the assessment and actually pass. So I'm not sure if I really hit on the right answer there
I
or
mean,
not.
that's an awesome analogy, whether it's accurate or not. It's awesome. And that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights and practical strategies.
Or dog
Sorry.
barks. Hey, you don't have to start over. We're a dog friendly podcast over here. I love
He
dogs.
he just decided that he was going to bark in that moment.
I
Um,
mean, sounds like a good time to bark to me.
okay. And that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving world of defense. We'd like to extend our appreciation to Mike for providing us with valuable insights and a pretty dang good analogy for this one. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure. And by the way, I'll tell you a quick story. Pre-pandemic, I used to work from home a lot. I guess maybe I wouldn't say unique, but I was one of the people that just, as a CEO, sometimes it's just easier to work from home where you can concentrate and it's just a much better life that way. And, I'll tell you, I used to really freak out when my dog would bark, which was often because my dog was trained to bark whenever somebody would come to the door. And, with Amazon, you get deliveries constantly throughout the day. And finally, one day, someone said to me, as the dog's barking, I'm apologizing for it. They go, "Don't apologize. Uh, I think it's really cool that you have a dog. You're much more human, if you will, when it comes to the dog." And I said, "Thank you." And I said, "It would be good if I could relax if the dog barks." And she says, "Listen, I think people who have dogs are wonderful people, and they're probably better people than people without dogs." And I said, "Well, that's an interesting perspective." So I decided from that point on that I would not freak out when my dog barks. I would just simply say, "Hey, listen, working from home today, no big deal." And at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. You know what? Sometimes dogs are awesome. They come, they keep you company, they make you happier, and you know what? They're man's best friend and even woman's best friend sometimes. And at the end of the day, if a dog wants to bark in the middle of my podcast, that's okay. Don't edit it out. I think you know what? Dogs are awesome and they make our life a lot better. So come join my podcast anytime, dog. I'm all about it.
There you go. We're human humans here at On Call.
That's right.
Uh, but the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these topics and connect with us via our social media channels, which again is On Call Compliance Solutions. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. If they haven't already, what should they do, Mike?
Well, they should definitely like it, they should subscribe it, and they should definitely tell their friends about it so we can help them with compliance too.
Tell your friends and your dogs. And we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought-provoking episodes and high-quality content. Join us next time as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.